And with that, I will hand it over to you, Hope.
Thanks, Carrie. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for taking the time to attend today's session. I'll spend the next 20 to 30 minutes discussing how to measure your efficiency and identify opportunities within your packaging graphics process. Before we get started, by way of a brief introduction, my name is Hope Massey. I am director of the SGK Consulting team in the Americas, originally from the UK, but have been based in Chicago in the US for the last 2.5 years now. My background was initially in law, but I've spent the last 6.5 or 7 years working with blue chip clients across various different industries globally to drive improvements within their marketing operations. Okay. Disruptions and rapidly changing market conditions require new strategies to win. It's time to rethink how you measure the performance of your packaging content ecosystem. There's been a shift in patient buying patterns. The key challenges that our clients are facing appear to flow back to one pretty simple thing, which is the need for what seems like a mass amount of marketing content to be created very quickly but managed by a limited set of resources. Money has been leaving marketing operations for many years now and is being reinvested into things like marketing strategies and marketing technologies, all forcing companies to be more effective and efficient with their marketing operations. As a result, companies are being targeted to explore all areas to release capital, and the areas that you will typically see most savings is within functions of operationalization, such as the supply chain. But as pressure continues to mount and efficiencies are gained in these areas, it's forcing companies to look into their business processes, and marketing operations has become an increasing focus for many. As people look to minimize social contact due to the pandemic, it's unsurprising that we're seeing accelerated growth in e-commerce. This shift isn't a new trend, but it has been heightened as a reaction to this pandemic. We're seeing exponential change in how patients shop as people start to establish new habits. And we see older demographics that have previously been disengaged with online buying move towards that as their new norm. This is especially true in the OTC category. According to McKinsey, online purchasing of OTC products has increased by 44% since the start of the pandemic. This means digital presence is more important than ever. E-commerce content that can be produced quickly and at scale is key to success. And there is an argument to say that we may see some drop-off post-pandemic, but we believe that this situation will set a new pace for e-commerce and patients' expectation of packaging content moving forward. The way that your brand is manifested on the physical and digital pack remains to be one of the most important mediums to target patients. For OTC, patients' purchases are heavily influenced by how the pack appears on shelf. And for RX, the pack is more important for different reasons, to clearly convey information and directions, which is why we're seeing a big trend towards connected pack and an uptick in connected pack to create a whole new relationship and way of communicating with patients. It's undeniable the effect that COVID-19 has had on the healthcare industry and how it's accelerated emerging trends and the need for large volumes of content. As patients eagerly await a COVID-19 vaccine, they are refocusing on their overall well-being, having a strong interest in things like immune system support, de-stressing and sleep aid products as people navigate COVID-19 fears and seek to boost their ability to fight off illnesses. And those companies that will be successful are focusing their efforts on turning existing and new obstacles into opportunities. As we think about this new norm, it's important to recognize the need to assess your packaging content ecosystem as a whole to identify opportunities to increase speed and agility that will position you to win. If we think about things like integrating your physical packaging content supply chain with the digital packaging content supply chain, it's a critical way to ensure consistency, optimizing on assets and strengthening brand presence to drive speed. Leveraging lean principles and emerging technology to drive speed and agility across the physical and digital shelf that will help position you to win patients' engagements and loyalty. And taking it one step further, how to take the mindset of agile marketing that is applied to digital content and apply this to the packaging supply chain to increase personalization of products, which we're seeing an uptick in, particularly in the OTC arena as brands are competing, in addition to the influx of own brands in this space. All this ultimately driving towards the need to identify areas to unlock hidden capital within your operations, to reinvest in other higher ROI initiatives, increasing your speed and agility. Capturing and reviewing and analyzing key process metrics is a critical part to ensure that you are able to understand the baseline and identify action areas to drive cost and speed efficiencies. We're going to spend the next few slides discussing key performance metrics that we believe are critical for companies to measure and analyze to understand the efficiency within your packaging content ecosystem. SGK's consulting team have had a huge amount of experience consulting across many client engagements across many different industries. With each engagement, we typically hear the same myths across various cross-functional stakeholders as we start to dig deep during the discovery phase of the process. And as a byproduct, we see the real impact that such beliefs have on the overall efficiency of the packaging supply chain. We all have experience pulling the hero move, working long hours, evenings, weekends to deliver against what seems like an unachievable deadline. And I'm sure many of you have been in this position a number of times and also seen, or in some cases, had to ask your teams to do the same. By identifying these areas of inefficiencies within the supply chain, this is how we can start to not only unlock that hidden capital, but free up yours and your team's time to focus on what is important. Some key examples of what we hear is if I start my project sooner, it will get done quicker. Thousands of non-value add labor hours are required to micromanage projects that are not fully vetted and therefore missing key inputs, causing significant churn. Additionally, there's a lot of sunk costs that are realized if projects get cancelled after they've been commenced. Another one we hear is it's okay to pass through stage gates without all inputs. The team can get started and I'll just add them in later. This fix it later mentality may work anecdotally, but at an enterprise level, it drives multiple rounds of time-consuming revisions, which increases cost, time, and labor hours due to higher rounds of revisions, amendments, back and forth clarification requests. The process should be thought about as if it's a manufacturing process. If you think about it in that way, you wouldn't start building a car without all of the components in place to make sure that that car would work once it's been built and that it's safe to drive. Alternatively, for the bakers in the audience, you wouldn't bake a cake using no eggs or rotten eggs and expect the output to be good and expect family and friends to enjoy it. The same logic applies to your branded content creation. At one organization that we partnered with, we were able to reduce their production revisions by 67%, eliminating 4,000 hours of labor annually and reducing agency and resource costs by 6 figures, hard costs, which was a significant improvement for that organization. It is normal and expected to have high rounds of revisions within the creative and artwork production process. Okay, it is expected that the creative phase of the process will have more iterations, but there should be no revisions at the production phase if all inputs are accurate, complete, and on time. Clarity of project scope, decision rights, and complete and accurate inputs can significantly drive down the number of revisions. Design is special and therefore must be elevated for all projects. Ensuring that the upfront work is done to link expected business outcomes with design requirements leads organizations to treat projects differently and allocate dollars and resources more intelligently. This enables organizations to increase throughput, improve speed to market, reduce costs, and enable resources, again, to focus on that higher ROI work. And finally, each project is unique, and therefore it's okay to treat each one differently. The failure to recognize that your packaging graphics process is much like a manufacturing process leads large organizations to miss significant efficiency opportunities. Processes and governance should be established and adhered to ensure a consistent and efficient approach to developing your branded content. So let's talk about performance data. Following the various engagements that we have worked on, we developed a consultative KPI benchmarking model to enable our clients to see how they measure up against others within their class, enabling data to help understand the health of your operation and inform those opportunities. This enables clients to see industry best practice, as well as industry average metrics to understand the size of the opportunity relative to others, and develop tailored solutions to realize greater efficiencies within your operations. The SGK Consulting benchmarking model plots clients' performance against the typical KPIs that we see within the industry, which we have listed on screen now. I'm just going to walk through each of these to make sure that everyone understands what we're referring to as we talk to these different terms as we go through the subsequent slides with the various data points. Right the first time, consider this metric to be the big picture measure that shows the percentage of total artworks that's approved in that first cycle. Bit for use inputs is the percentage of inputs that are complete and accurate for use in creation of your packaging artwork. Artwork versions are the number of versions an artwork needs to be routed through prior to final approval, including that initial version, V1. If the data showed an average of 3 versions, that would be 1 initial brief, right the first time, plus 2 amendments, which is waste activity. Cycle time is the number of business days from project initiation of artwork creation through to release to print, eliminating any governing body approvals, which can be anywhere from weeks to months to years, depending. We focus on what is within your remit of control. And finally, artwork approval time is the number of business days to complete the review and approval of one artwork version. We're coming up to the exciting part where we'll share the benchmarking data, but before we go into that, there's some key caveats I want to highlight. First, the healthcare is defined as companies that manage brands and diverse product portfolios that are regulated by an external governing body like the FDA or health authority. We focus on mid to large size healthcare organizations. We leverage data that was provided across the clients that we surveyed within the SGK portfolio. And the data is a mix of clients across different regions. So the data set is global in nature. Okay, so kicking off with right the first time. What we found is that best-in-class operations function at 86% right the first time, with an industry average sitting at 67%. Right the first time allows for a simple and quick method of measuring the overall effectiveness of the production process. Clients with a high right the first time percentage tend to have fewer amends and shorter production cycles. Driving a high right the first time percentage will enable you to do things like free up resources within the team, eliminate these hero efforts, which are usually driven by poor upfront planning and high churn in the process. And monitoring this data point is a really effective way to get a grasp on the overall health of your operation so that you can start to dig deep into other areas of the process to identify where the root cause challenges are. Next, we have fit for use. Sourcing correct inputs consistently is a major challenge for many organizations. Tracking the rate that inputs are acceptable for production can be an effective method to drive improvements. A colleague once shared an amusing video with me once. It was of a father who challenged his 2 children, young children, to write down instructions on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. The father followed those instructions exactly and watched the children's reactions when he presented the final sandwich. Funnily enough, the final sandwich was not the quality output that his children wanted and was not what they expected, and they didn't want to eat it. It shared a lot of similarities to the challenges faced with inputs for the packaging content creation. In this area, we typically see opportunities to review how ancillary processes interact with that core packaging graphics workflow. What are the handoffs and interactions with the different stakeholder groups? What are the trigger points? Is there an education requirement around the importance of input supplied? How can we drive consistency of those inputs? Best in class is at 95%, with the industry average sitting at 71%. A high number of artwork versions is an early and reliable indicator that there are challenges with sourcing correct and consistent inputs for artwork production. Typical challenges driving high versions distill down to 3 key areas: aesthetics, structural, and copy. Inefficiencies are often around the lack of design lock, with no upfront support to ensure feasibility of that design when it goes to print. And we also see incomplete handovers from the strategic design agency to the adaptive agency, or the design function to production. We also see a lot of unclear annotations or mass amounts of annotations, incomplete copy inputs with particular challenges around ingredients, supplementary facts and claims, plank codes, but also non-finalized or changing die lines. A lot of opportunity again to ensure strong inputs into the process to reduce this churn, which may require more upfront effort, but will ultimately reduce the effort of the teams at the back end of the process. Realizing this efficiency is orientated around effective change management as you think about driving that adoption of change across the various stakeholder groups that interact with and inform that core workflow. As it relates to best in class, it sits at 1.2, meaning that 0.2% of the time there is a revision to an artwork, with an industry average sitting at 2.3 versions. Cycle time. This is a critical KPI that gives transparency to the overall efficiency and speed within the graphics supply chain in context to others within the same class. Speed is key for many organizations as they compete to get new products on shelf, with an opportunity to target reducing that overall cycle time to improve speed to market. Best in class is at 14 days, with the average sitting at 31 days, again excluding days for governing bodies to approve. An artwork approval is a typical bottleneck within the artwork production process. Clients with multiple rounds of revisions and therefore multiple rounds of approval can see approval timing accounting for a significant portion of their total production cycle. We've seen everything from in-person meetings where they're discussing and approving the artwork, which typically drives churn as this is then used as a forum to request additional changes and collaborate on the artwork, through to every stakeholder approving every amended version that comes through the process. And in some cases, we've seen up to 10 people individually checking the artwork. I'm sure you can imagine the significant strain on resources, cost, and time when you start to multiply those checks by the number of versions, by the number of stakeholders that have to look at that. Some companies who have implemented work from home as a means of stemming the COVID-19 outbreak may have seen an opportunity to realize the inefficiencies that were hidden through these large in-person meetings as they navigate the challenges of working together when people can't be in the same location. There's a balancing act to be struck between ensuring effective quality control versus the non-value add waste activity, but it can be achieved. And we've seen best in class at 3 days, with an industry average sitting at 5 days. So what comes next? How does the data reveal opportunities for you to win? As we walk through the data, I'm sure many of you were sat there benchmarking yourselves against the industry data, thinking about where you sit and how you are operating against your peers. For me, the key takeaway is, as we look at these large, powerful organizations, there are always opportunities to improve, always more ways to drive efficiencies in your costs and speed. Even those operating at best in class have further opportunities to improve and mature their operations. And as we think about the opportunities, we believe there's 8 key opportunities that each company can start to look at immediately to drive efficiencies within their ways of working. Firstly, eliminating defined stage gates, ensuring that deliverables are locked prior to moving into a next phase will limit waste if projects are cancelled and will reduce churn that can happen throughout the process. Accurate and consistent inputs can significantly reduce waste relating to cost, time, and resource. If you take the car and cake analogy that I referred to earlier, or even the peanut butter and jelly example I gave, good inputs equals good outputs. Upfront project planning and management, allowing planning, time, and alignment upfront for all stakeholders to conduct their role effectively will ensure bottlenecks are eliminated from the process, as everyone is aware of what is coming and can deliver on time. Having that project management role to act as strategic oversight of all projects is critical for success. And eliminating non-value add process steps. Sometimes it requires an objective person to come and take a look at the ways of working to ask why. Why are you doing things the current way? And a lot of the time when we come in, we find that people don't actually know. And it's understandable if you think about it. The ways of working are from legacy leaders or legacy employees that have trained that individual on how they should operate, or it's off the back of mergers and acquisitions that have never been aligned or right-sized. We find a lot of opportunities to streamline ways of working by identifying redundant or duplicative action within the workflow. Aligned decision rights and ancillary processes. Ensuring everyone is aligned with what their role and responsibility is critical to ensure no duplication of activities, and that we have the understanding of what other processes are supporting the core workflow, how they interact, what the key trigger points are and dependencies to ensure that there aren't any bottlenecks. Right-sized and parallel approval matrices. Again, we often see a lot of waste at this stage. Increased time due to sequential approvals, every approver approving each version, those kind of activities. Organizations are very risk adverse, particularly in the health industry, which is understandable. But the question is, how do we find a balance? Looking at things like parallel approvals, aligning ownership of artwork components to what is being approved, leveraging technology in some cases to mitigate against error. These are all ways to mitigate risk and still have the checks and balances in place to ensure that quality is achieved and no errors get through. And workflow management tools and innovative technology, enabling reduction in manual activities which add time and increase risk of human error. Leverage automation and innovative tools to reduce the manual activities relating to project management, briefing, approvals, proofing, and even in some cases, artwork production. And all of these are just some opportunities to look at to drive greater efficiencies within your processes and unlock that hidden capital. What do winning opportunities look like? In doing some of the opportunities that I've just walked through, we believe that you'll realize great benefits. We often support our clients to achieve greater efficiencies and have seen significant savings relating to speed, cost, and labor. We've seen up to 70% increased speed to market, up to 60% improved right the first time, up to 80% reduction in labor time, up to 500% increased throughput, and all of this resulting in millions worth of hard cost savings just by driving those efficiencies and optimizing on those opportunities within the workflow. Where can you go for help? There are many consulting firms that are born from various places. We have back office consulting like Accenture, we have temp agency consulting like Seller, but SGK's consulting group are born out of marketing operations. We recognized a challenge a few years ago within our clients and developed a tailored group to support that challenge specifically. We believe that we know your business and we understand the healthcare space. Our teams have worked within and alongside some of the best minds in the healthcare world and have access to a mass pool of global subject matter experts that drive best-in-class thinking, that monitor current trends, and are continuously developing new innovations in this industry. And because of this, we are confident in the value that we can provide to you and will partner with you throughout the end-to-end process, including implementation of your tailored solution to ensure a high adoption of change and realization of project benefits. And with that, I will hand back to Carrie and open it up for questions. Thank you everyone for listening.
So Hope, we have received a couple key questions. Thank you for those who submitted. First question, from your experience and perspective, which key performance indicator is the most important to focus on to help us increase our speed to market?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think every organization should be focusing on all 5 data points that we've just walked through to give a view of the overall health and efficiency of the process. I don't think there is a silver bullet. However, we do see that there's a lot of challenges relating to increased time and cost that comes down to poor inputs into the process. So if organizations had to hyper-focus on had to hyper-focus on a certain area, I would say it should be on providing accurate, final and on-time inputs into the production process. And I believe by doing so, you would see significant improvements.
Another question that we have is, have you had success engaging regulatory into the process to limit revision rounds to lower costs and increase speed to market? And if so, what is the role of your internal sponsor?
Yeah, we've had, in my opinion, regulatory stakeholders are a critical part of the process as it relates to providing inputs as well as reviewing and approving. Due to the complexity of these inputs and the interaction that typically happens up front of the process with the likes of marketing, legal, and medical, this is an area that we tend to see bottlenecks. And I think it's important to understand the triggers and the ancillary processes of functions like regulatory and how it interconnects with that core workflow to ensure that you are developing a way of working that is successful and sustainable. But as it relates to the back end of your question around the importance of the internal sponsor, this all comes back to driving change management across the stakeholder groups. I think by involving the different stakeholders in developing what that optimized future state would look like, it's a great way to drive that change management and increase ownership and drive a high adoption rate of the change across those stakeholder groups. With any organization, organizational change, active and visible sponsorship is key to success, but as much as you can bring those stakeholder groups along that journey, I think that's critical for success.
Oh, that's perfect. We've received another one. How can KPIs drive the change management needed to align the organization to take advantage of the success metrics you have shared?
Yeah, another really great question. Change management is all about taking individuals on their own journey of change. We, as a consulting team, use the ProSci ADKAR methodology, which is about taking individuals on the journey of initial awareness of the change to developing desire, knowledge, and ability through to reinforcing and sustaining the change. Developing desire within the teams is a fundamental building block to ensure high adoption of the change and results are realized. This is also where we see most of the barriers to adopting to the change in place. And having access to these KPI data is not only the internal performance data, but also how your current state measures up against others within your class, gives everyone the opportunity to overcome this potential barrier and can provide a tangible guide to what can be achieved.
Got it. One more question we have is, our company struggles with change. What have you seen as the key to companies that are best of class, and how did you help them get there? And did you help them get there? Sorry.
Yeah, active and visible executive sponsorship is critical to ensure that results are realized. In my experience on the projects that I've worked on, companies that have achieved success, and not just the short-term success, but success that's sustainable for the long term, have invested in driving transformational change rather than these small incremental improvements. And they've also had extremely strong executive sponsorship that can support the end-to-end project, aiding in things like communication, clearing roadblocks, and being visible to implement and sustain the change across the network. These companies are also typically very focused on data, and they've put mechanisms in place to measure, review, and analyze performance with a focus on driving continuous improvements and being able to see results realized off the back of improvement projects.
One more. Where do you see the biggest gap in perception of how a client is performing against best in class, and who can influence that?
In my experience, organizations tend to think that they are moving faster than they actually are and have less revisions than they actually do. The reason being that in a lot of cases, individuals have created workarounds that support their part of the process rather than looking at the process holistically. And a lot of this happens outside of systems, which impacts the organization's ability to have visibility to what is really happening. And all of this adds up and ends up causing greater inefficiencies than the efficiencies that are gained in silo. For me, it's really important that when identifying opportunities and developing what this improved future state could be, that you look at the overall operation holistically so that you can develop a model that functions more efficiently and in a sustainable way.
Well, one more question, Hope. What approaches do you adopt to convert and prove to clients against the truth of the myths you've outlined earlier in the presentation?
Can you say that question again? Sorry, Carrie.
Sure. What approaches do you adopt to convert and prove to clients against the truth of the myths you've outlined?
Could we get clarity on what is meant by the myths that's outlined?
Yeah, I think that they were talking about basically the myths that you talked about earlier, the myths versus realities from the consulting person. Yes, yeah.
So yeah, one of the ways to do this with clients that are just starting off engaging with us is to show the reality of what's been happening with other clients. So we've worked with a number of clients that we hear these myths from, and we're able to show what the reality was and how we've helped drive them to an improved future state. Another way of doing it is, as we approach any new project, we start with this immersive discovery phase where we delve deep into understanding what the current state is and understanding current baseline. And then we look to how analyzing that information and gleaning those insights to develop out what that future state could look like. I think a lot of those myths typically come out in that discovery phase, and we're able to use that information and the data that we glean during that phase to quantify the impact that those actions are having on the organization.
And one more, Hope. So given the challenges of COVID, how has SGK Consulting adopted either virtual or contactless consulting?
Yeah, it's a great question. At the start of the pandemic, when we realized the impact that would occur off the back of not being able to travel and have these in-person meetings, we invested a lot of time and energy in looking into how we could develop a contactless consulting approach. We looked into like the psychology of virtual facilitation. We looked at things like what smart tools were out there that we could use to support us with consulting activities. And we developed an approach that follows the fundamental core approach that we've always followed: discovery, solution development, and implementation. But we found a way to glean learnings and leverage tools and methodologies and approaches to achieve success in a virtual setting.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Hope. Your presentation has been very insightful. For those of you that were able to attend, we will be sending out the presentation, as we stated earlier, just along with a very brief survey where we welcome any feedback or questions that you have. Please be sure to follow SGK on LinkedIn to stay in the know of all of our future webinars. Take care, and really thank you, Hope, and have a great rest of your day for those who were able to attend today. We appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Carrie.